spring game today, man. We lit, man. We lit.
So let's get right into it, Brian. With Dan Morrison joining the offensive staff, what changes or wrinkles can we expect with the offensive personnel and play calling this coming season?
Well, yeah, first, I think it's they feel it's huge to have Dan Morrison back on staff. He's a guy who was around for some of the glory days of the UH run and shoot offense from 2000 to 2007. Head coach Timmy Chang himself during his playing days out here, and also had guys like Colt Brennan, who are legendary names not only here but the kind of respect he gets on the mainland when people talk about Hawaii football. So this is a guy who's worked with some of the very best to come through this program in the modern era, and he brought his notebook with him from his previous stops. He was doing a little bit in the semi-pro football realm. These last years or two, he was with June Jones at SMU after his Hawaii stint. So it's been a little bit of a circuitous situation for Dan Morrison, but he's back in the fold here, and I think they're going to have him kind of help shape the future of this run and shoot offense they're running.
So can we expect an uptick in the passing production? Last year, Hawaii averaged 276 yards per game, as well as an increase in the scoring production as they averaged 21.1 points per game this last year.
Yeah, it was, kind of that first main foray back into the run and shoot that a lot of folks might remember. Of course, it wasn't the same version from those mid-2000s years, but they're trying to adapt it for the modern age. They certainly would like to generate more than 21 points a game. We saw, how fruitless that could be at times for them when they're only, scoring in the teens or the low 20s. Certainly not enough to get it done in college football most weekends. So they are hoping for an uptick in their production, and that really does begin with the passing game. I think they would like to average, if I haven't asked them, this specifically, but certainly more than 300 passing yards a game. I think they feel like they can do that with Braden Shager coming back for his senior season of college ball after his saga with the transfer portal. Now he's back. And honestly, though, getting the running game up to balance that out a little bit, because I think teams could just sit on the pass for almost all last year. The running back room was a bit depleted and just struggled to produce, honestly, all of last year. They were second to last in FBS, I want to say, in rushing yards per game. So with a boost there, you would hope the passing game would come along a little bit more as well.
That's a great segue into our next question. So last preseason, I know myself and Luke and others, we were very excited to see what Tylan Hines could do in this offense. For various reasons, he never really got going last year, I guess injuries, other things. Mm-hmm. Can we expect a bounce-back season for him, and what can we expect his role in the offense to be?
Yeah, Justice, I mean, I was certainly waiting to see what Tylan could do as like their featured back last year, and he just was dinged up pretty much from the get-go, and they kind of forced them to play around with some other backs coming in, with Landon Sims maybe being one of their most productive guys by season's end. So yeah, in a lot of ways, it was kind of a lost season for Tylan because he did so much for him as a true freshman receiver. And they figured out like, okay, well, we got these other guys, Ashlock and McBride. He's probably best served being our featured running back. Now, I guess, maybe a little bit of a mulligan situation. They're still trying him out at running back. We'll see how that, manifests itself in the fall. But I would hope for the guy that for sticking it out, staying put with the Rainbow Warriors, that he would see some benefit to that at the position, because he certainly, when he's right, is one of their most dynamic, explosive players.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, other than quarterback, what is the biggest drop-off between the starters and the backup? And this can be offensive side, defensive side, pretty much like, hey, we can't afford to get any injuries here because we're going to be struggling all season.
Yeah, it is tough to say to an extent at this early stage. I mean, it's still not even March, but I would tell you, Luke, that that connection between the quarterback and his top flight receivers is so important in this run and shoot scheme that we saw Pofele Ashlock get freshman All-America honors by one publication this past year. Him and Stephen McBride, as their kind of 1,000-yard or in the ballpark guys last year, are really the returning cornerstone of the receiving corps. So having those guys stay healthy, knock on wood and everything else, is going to be key for their offense for sure.
You alluded to it a little bit earlier. Has there been any issues or any buzz regarding the Braden Shager situation in terms of him, kind of checking out the portal, coming back, any chemistry or?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. That was kind of one thing that was top of mind for me, Justice, as spring ball started up, because as you guys pointed out, I mean, Hawaii was like the first one in the country to enter spring ball so soon on the heels of the 2023 season. So, and that the Braden Shager transfer portal saga played out well into December. It was late December that it was announced that he'd be coming back into the fold for this 2024 season. Yeah, I mean, that's still, I think, a valid question heading into the fall. Like, has that trust been fully reestablished? Gave some of those guys the obligatory question when they had their media availabilities, and Braden brushed it off, said, hey, me and the guys are good, as you would expect him to say. And one or two other guys, Pofele Ashlock.
Yeah, I just say I saw him.
He laughed it off. And he made it sound like it was more than just a cursory response. He made it sound like there was definitely the reconnection between him and the quarterback, which is obviously a very important one to have. So at least in his personal instance, I'd say there's nothing lingering there. Whether that's true of all the guys on the roster, I don't know, because that was a kind of a situation you don't see all that often, where a guy goes in the portal and comes back.
Yeah.
All right, so we've heard some rumblings that the staff wants to get the tight ends more involved this year. Is that true?
I mean, that's it's been talked about for the last decade plus, probably going back to the Norm Chow days of really wanting to get some top flight tight ends established out here, and we haven't quite ever seen it totally, take form. Other than, I will say, a couple years ago, Jordan Murray was the guy that I thought would explode onto the scene, transfer from Missouri State. Had some great moments in the preseason camp, but it wasn't Jordan Murray. It was Caleb Phillips, who really kind of became their productive tight end. This is 2022, and he got first team All Mountain West honors, which I believe was a first for Hawaii as a program, having a first team All Conference tight end. That's going back to their WAC days. It's just never been a position, by and large, that has been depended on or produced much out here in the islands. So whether they can get, one of those guys really established this year, I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, Grayson Morgan was the starter, their first string guy last year, and he transferred out after a few games because I just don't think he was being utilized the way maybe he had envisioned. So, Tauefa and Travion Williams, you guys, I think, mentioned to me as a couple of the guys you had heard about. Tauefa did have some, he had 5 catches, I believe, for 1 touchdown last year. So of any of those guys, I would say maybe he has the inside track, if there is one at this point, to, maybe being one of their more named tight ends this year.
So last season, we talked about Pofele Ashlock a lot. He kind of burst onto the college football scene in a big way. I don't think anyone outside of maybe, the Hawaii staff, yourself, people that watch the team expected that. Is there an offensive skill player that maybe we can expect another, breakout for this coming season?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I certainly didn't know about Pofele's credentials to that extent coming in to expect him to have that kind of freshman year. So absolute credit to him for becoming really that one of the team leaders by season's end, not just in terms of production, but a guy that people look to. He has local island ties here with some of his Polynesian roots. He's from the state of Texas. It's where he went to high school and had a nice career there. So he's a guy who can, I think, relate to a lot of the different kind of pockets on the team at once. But to answer your question, Justice, a guy who was a second-year freshman last year who I thought really looked like maybe could do some good things down the line was Alex Perry, wideout, 6'5", 200 pounds. I don't have his stats here in front of me that he did, but it was, you know what, maybe I do.
Looks like 24 catches, 277. Yep.
Yeah. So that was a nice start to him for sure for his first full season playing behind some guys. And now I think, as he matures, he could be a nice breakout guy for them.
Cool.
So you mentioned Alex Perry as a potential breakout. Is that the wide receiver, that like third wide receiver you kind of expect to step up the season behind Ashlock and McBride, or because of where he plays, there might be a different wide receiver that is that third wide receiver that steps up?
They with their run and shoot, they always tend to have, guys kind of having mini breakouts at different times of the year. So I don't know if he might be that like go-to third guy for the entirety of the season, but I mean, you had Kawali Nishigai at slot back. He was one of their more productive guys. He's back. So I'm sure just maybe from a possession receiver standpoint, he might be one of their main guys they look to for a first down. Carson Pupunu, Lahaina guy, really, sad situation. What happened there, of course, with his family, but he stayed with the team and he played right through tragedy in his hometown over there on Maui. So we'll see what he can do with another year under his belt. They have several guys who could be that guy, to answer your question, Luke. But of all of them, I would say Alex Perry, and just from what I've observed in stretches here and there, could be one of the more important ones.
So you heard it here first from Brian. We got Alex Perry, that maybe under the radar guy, and maybe steps into Stephen McBride's role in the offense. You think when he graduates this year?
It could happen, man. It's so tough to project out more than like a matter of months.
1 year.
Era of
doing
this, it's never something you can take for granted that a guy will be around, and that's nothing on Alex specifically, but anybody
absolutely
in this age of college sports.
Makes sense.
So I read your recent article on the spring game. I loved it, by the way. You talked about a lot of the young guys that got a lot of the playing time in that game. And there's two guys in particular I kind of want to hear your thoughts and impressions on, and that's the two young quarterbacks, John Keava Sagapulotele and Micah Alahado. What can you tell us about those two guys?
Yeah, so John Keava Sagapulotele has been in the system now for a full year. He redshirted last year. He got to travel a little bit on the back end of last season. Wasn't a guy who got out there, but he's a Punahou School graduate. He's a guy who's I think pretty familiar now with what they're running. So it was him, as I wrote in the story you referenced, Justice, because they held out pretty much all of their first and even second string guys. It was all John Keava Sagapulotele and Micah Alahado as the two quarterbacks going up and down the field for their hour of 11s that they conducted. And they both had their moments. They both found one guy for, I can remember for absolute certainty, each for a touchdown. And then they were going for 2-point conversions as well. And I think they got them both, if I'm not mistaken. But it was kind of fun. They were in an abundance of caution, holding out all their top flight guys like a Braden Shager, even a Jake Farrell, who was his primary backup last year. I would still imagine those guys being kind of the 1-2, heading into the fall. But it was nice moment, especially for Micah Alejado, who just was coming in off leading Bishop Gorman to a national Max Preps national championship there in November, and undefeated season. Didn't throw a pick his entire senior year. Did play in the Polynesian Bowl here on Oahu. Threw a pick 6 on his first play of the Polynesian Bowl, so that was a unfortunate kind of welcome home for him. But he looked good in the spring game this past weekend, and I don't know how much we'll see of the two of them this coming year. Maybe they'll get thrown in as you get up to 4 appearances right before your redshirt year's burned. So that's a possibility.
And we talked about this earlier. It's hard to do, but if you had to look into the future, would you give the nod to one over the other, or it's Alejado might not have been there long enough to really be able to say? But
right, and I think that is true what you just said. I mean, it's very quick to judge, but I will say that Alejado felt like one of the gems of their signing class this past fall, and Coach Chang and Chris Brown, who's now the associate head coach, was the linebackers coach last year and still is, but added associate head coach to his titles this offseason. They really made a last second push to make sure Alejado remained a UH commit. They went up there to his family home in Las Vegas. He's a local boy from Eva Beach, but he was living up there obviously to play at Bishop Gorman. They made a visit to him up there, and just to kind of lock in, keep that commitment in place. Because I think UNLV was making a push at him, or at least, playing that game where you force Hawaii to commit a little more resources to making sure that he's in place at the last second.
So you talked about with the play, or kind of like that system. Is this system probably more than any other system? Like, you really got to be entrenched in that playbook for a year before you can really kind of master that in regards to Alejado of he might be special. I don't know. Is there something special when he throws the ball that is just different than anybody else? But then hey, you still got to consume this playbook and really master it before you can mesh the two together.
I think there definitely is a learning curve, Luke, with the fully, getting on the same page with your receivers in the run and shoot, especially because it is very much a feel kind of read and react offense where you got to know that your receivers are going to react the same way when, the quarterback and the receiver see the same thing on the field. And that takes time. We saw it this past year with Braden Shager. I mean, UH did win 3 of its last 4 games, but they took their lumps the first half and more of last season, and they started throwing in some run and shoot concepts the year before, like midstream, because the offense was, I think, just kind of muddled and not much of an identity to it. So they tried to establish that some by the end of 2022, and it took, for Braden Shager, he talked about how much of a learning process it was on the fly. Only till probably the last few games of last year would I say that he truly felt comfortable in it. And now that Dan Morrison is here, a guy who he's worked with in off seasons, has a true relationship with, that should help further. But for a guy like Alejado, I would imagine there is some, even if he understands the concepts in the book perfectly, just that feel with your receivers, you got to get those reps in for sure.
All right, thank you. So last season we often saw quarterback Dalen Morris come in at the goal line in situations and run the Wildcat. Now that he's gone, is there someone else that you might think does that, or are we going to stick with a traditional offense in those situations?
I can't say for sure, and I'm sure they'll still have some stuff deep in the playbook to bust out, maybe in goal line situations. But that, I think, was tailored specifically to the skill set of Mr. Dalen Morris, who just an awesome dude. Had a chance to talk to him a few times last year, and as an active duty naval service member here in the islands, being allowed by his command to play full-time college football, and by UH allowing him to have all these time demands with the military, it just made for a very I think the word unique is thrown around a little, probably too often. by folks, but I think that was truly a unique situation crossover where, and then his skill set. I mean, yes, he had the option reps coming from the Naval Academy, and them being able to employ it in those short yardage situations, I think was a perfect kind of marriage. So I don't know if they'll have that again, but it was certainly fun to see at times last year.
So last season, track star Eddie Asa Nkatia joined the team to play wide receiver. What can you tell us about his development? And can we expect to see maybe more impact on the field this year?
Eddie, yeah, that they're hoping he develops into something for sure. He's got a little bit of a raw skill set, but they were doing him as a receiver and seeing maybe if he had some return man potential last year. I think they've kind of gone away from that. They're lining him up at running back this spring game and throughout the spring. So we'll see if that kind of takes hold heading into the fall.
And if you guys are not familiar with this player, Brian, tell us a little bit about his background.
Yeah, he's got ties with both New Zealand and Australia, and I believe he was competing in Australia. But he's a track star. I mean, he's a sprinter. He's I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but
he's fast.
He's fast. He end to end. He's got speed. So the key has been just putting a football in his hands first and seeing what he can do with it. So we'll I'm not going to say he's going to break out this year, but you never know.